Hello. So today I'm here with Matt Gillooly. So I work with Matt at Headlight, and I'll intro him super quickly. Matt has been working on something that I found really, really interesting, and I think has a lot of applications pretty much across all clients. So I was pretty lucky that he had time to chat about it here. Um, yeah, Matt, do you want to? I guess we can start by just diving in specifically to the problem that you were interested in and what
Yeah,
you were. Yeah, what's the challenge? And I'm gonna ask the leading question here, a super leading question. Do you think marketers like generally know their audience very well?
that's a really interesting question. I think as marketers, we always like to believe we know a lot of things. We know, we've done certain things. We have certain experiences and perspectives that we've built over a number of years. And as you work on any particular brand, you like to believe that you understand the customer and that the customer is in a way like segmentation is kind of putting customers in a box. It's sort of trying to separate so that you can conceptualize something complex about the world and making it more real. I guess it's probably helpful if I tell you a little bit of myself. So like, why am I listening to this guy? So I've worked in the marketing space for a long time, which again doesn't mean that I know everything. It actually, I think there's a lot of value to assuming you actually don't know things. But I've worked in the marketing space for over a decade, um, and specifically at agencies. I've worked on a lot of different advertisers, cross-platform, etc. A cool thing behind me, there's a trophy. It's pretty cool. I was one of five US and Canada advertisers to win the Google App Growth Award for Google Premier Partner of the Year back in 2022. So I do know a little bit. Like I do have like an approach. One thing I think that has helped me though is to kind of leave your ego at the door, like understanding that you don't actually know as much as you think you do. If you walk in the room thinking you're the smartest person, you're never gonna actually try to learn anything. So I actually try to take the opposite approach, where I assume I don't know anything, and try to come in with an open mind and fresh perspective. Um, and so I think that's going back to your question. I think that's what's really important to do. As growth marketers, you want to believe that you know certain things, you have certain perspectives, but I think treating those as givens is actually where it becomes dangerous to assume you know things. Just because you've had one experience in the past doesn't mean that will apply to the future. In investing, they say it all the time: past results do not predict future results, future gains. So it can be very dangerous to assume that just because you saw something one time that it would apply in all cases, to generalize. Um, and I think there's other kind of a larger point too, that the the environment now is changing very rapidly, which we can talk about more. But even in the last couple of years, the marketing environment has changed very rapidly, so that a lot of things we took for granted in the past have now been upended by various events in the world.
Yeah. So it's kind of to like tie it back in, the marketers generally do think we know that the audience, but that view is so rapidly changing, and it's difficult. It's impossible to assume that you know your audience fully when those situations are changing, when their situations are changing constantly, when their feedback might be changing constantly. I guess when your product is changing constantly as well, and you're always making changes to it. What is user feedback to it? What are the new features that they find particularly valuable? That kind of stuff. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's definitely true. That's definitely part of it. I mean, if we just think of like, what are the big things that happened in the last 4 or 5 years? Back in 2020, I was going to get married, and I had a wedding date of March 28th, and nothing happened in the world in March of 2020. Actually, no, everything shut down, and the entire perspective of consumer needs shifted overnight. People were trying to reschedule their weddings, myself included, and overnight people were looking for touchless pickup. They were looking for e-commerce. there was a whole slew of brands that saw massive growth due to the pandemic. As just one example, after the lockdowns ended and things opened back up, there was a lot of other changes that occurred. There's been a lot of inflation recently and economic pressures, which has changed the calculus again. I think about like e-commerce. It's been the year of e-commerce for a long time. Post some of those events, e-commerce has become bigger and bigger. Additionally, things like contactless pickup have become more important. There's lots of different consumer needs that have shifted in the last in the last few years, and kind of the most recent one that I think is very relevant to our topic here today is technology has been changing very rapidly. Back in November of a few years ago, ChatGPT was launched, which is kickstarted an AI revolution, or we'll see if it's actually a revolution or if it's just another boom and bust cycle. But there's definitely been rapidly changing customer needs and customer expectations as a result of those technology changes too.
Yeah. I mean that leads very nicely into what because that's obviously incorporated into your solution of how do we better know our customers and how do we better stay up to date and in tune with our customers' expectations and what they value within a product and what their feedback is. So yeah, how does that fit into your solution? How do we know our audience better?
Yeah, so I think there's one thing that's like pretty interesting, a pretty interesting parallel that in my background, I have, I see certain things and I'm like, this is interesting. One of the things that's interesting with ChatGPT and large language models as a whole is basically what you're doing is you are having a conversation with an assistant. You're posing certain questions, you're directing the AI, the large language model, to look at different questions and consider certain pieces of information. And then there's also a larger set of information that the AI model is looking at. What's interesting with an AI is like, on the one hand, they've sponged up so much massive corpus of data that they can look at all this data, they can sift through it very quickly, and then they can rapidly iterate on, oh, we just learned something new about this that we hadn't seen before, and then it gets incorporated back into learning. In a certain sense, it's like, the ChatGPT knows a lot, but it actually doesn't know what it knows. In the same way, in a kind of weird kind of parallel way, that like as marketers, we think we know certain things, but then we have to test those assumptions and be iterative with it to validate that they're actually correct. So we might think something about the world, we might come up with a hypothesis, but then we have to test that assumption with real data, real marketing campaigns, real creative, things like that. So that's like a kind of interesting parallel. But yeah, I think it kind of goes back to the ChatGPT or the large language model. They, on the one hand, know a lot. They have a lot of access to data, but they also need to be prompted to assemble that data for certain applications.
Mm. And that it's almost like a bias within the model, right? Where it wants to steer down a certain way. It wants to kind of bring in like a wider set of assumptions, which we'll chat about later when it comes to the dangers of it. But I think that also tells us that's also like a parallel with marketers and ourselves when looking at customers, where we have an innate bias to look at customers from our product's point of view, where I think and it's anyone kind of embedded within a company is obviously very clued up about the product features, what the product does, the actual, details, the clever bits that make their product unique, and want to shout out about that. But it means that we have a bias to thinking about our product in terms of those features rather than our product in terms of the value that it provides for people.
Yeah.
And I always remember the classic example given here when I think it was Post-it notes, where it initially started as someone inventing readhesive glue that you could unstick, stick again. And they actually didn't use it for anything in particular, but then someone attached it to paper and started using it as a Post-it note. And suddenly that was the application for this, where it was, oh, this is the value that this product provides for so many people. And I think as marketers, we can get like embedded in what are our features rather than what are the values with that, which again to set it up, we need to listen to actually what customers are saying a bit more. And how do you, talking about large language models, how do you use that to uncover those, what customers think?
Yeah, I think this is another thing that marketers can sometimes take for granted is that you have certain confirmation biases that you may be presented with certain information, but then your certain context or situation ensures that it's gonna go in one ear and out the other. It's like, oh, I only run the ad campaigns for this, so I'm only looking for CTAs and places to put the tagline, which is like that's a very one-dimensional way to look at things. Customers are living in three dimensions. They're not confined to your office space, whether it be at home or in the office with your company. So they're living the journey real life, and they're living the problems real life. So um, what's helpful, I think, with ChatGPT and large language models is that you can bring a fresh perspective to old problems in a way that as a marketer or as a person who's has certain experiences, you would take certain things for granted. But if you're just asking and you're genuinely asking a question like, I please explain this to me, like what is going on here, what is your take on this, analyze this. um the large language model will give you sometimes unexpected answers, sometimes incorrect answers, but it also will give you just like a fresh perspective that can also challenge some of the assumptions we have built in. Um, I think a lot of times when we're looking at customer data, one big area that people look at is they look at customer reviews. Customer reviews is, you know, literally your customer is telling you what they think about a certain thing. And a lot of times it's based on, some of it is the squeaky wheel gets the grease. They complain so they get certain things. But in other cases, they're genuinely just frustrated because they have a certain problem that is incompletely met by the current state of the product. And sometimes, as we're running rapid product iterations or rapid market testing, we might not actually understand that there's a specific issue that's happening until we either see the data or we hear enough complaints through customer support to tell us that there is a problem. So what's interesting with that is we can actually take a look at what's being raised within customer reviews, and it's not departmentally, it's not split between, hey, like that's customer support's role, this is marketing's role over here. What we can do here is we can say, hey, we just want to understand what's best for the customer. What is a problem that they're having, and how can we address those problems in a new way and in a responsive way. And so that's kind of a cool main application of AI that I've been very excited with working on, because we can identify some of those things, those unmet needs, and different challenges that people are having that would be more difficult and time consuming to have. And also we'd have biases introduced as we look through the data.
Yeah. And the key word there, I guess, is the time consuming element where like, great, before ChatGPT, you could take a look through, I don't know, it depended how much time you have, but scrolling through a good number of customer reviews and getting a sense of what they say together and the underlying themes, that's tricky for a person. But a large language model, I mean, the clue is in the name, right? Large amounts of language, that's what they were built to process and understand. So rather than 10 reviews or whatever I can look through and get sense of, it's processing a ton of them.
Yeah, and that's like one of the big advantages. Like as we were talking about earlier, like customer needs change very quickly. So if the last time we looked at the customer reviews or last time we built our personas was, several years ago, that's going to be a pretty incomplete picture if like people's change, if in some sense certain segment of customers have been upended by a certain new change. As an app marketer, just the iOS platform has had multiple changes in terms of measurement, but also like consumers are now demanding privacy, whereas several years ago that was, there was sort of a big brother element, but people weren't as afraid of it. But now there's like really a demand in the market for that, as Apple and other players have started pushing for that. So just a real world example of how the customer preference can change, and customers may start voicing those concerns with the reviews that you would, if you programmed something to look at your reviews, you might have asked it specifically to look for these keywords before. But what large language models can do is actually more adaptable and just respond to the real world data, look at the most recent reviews, and tell us if there's what are the main problems people are telling us about.
Yeah, it's so I should say at this point, you have a series of blog posts coming out on this. The first of which will be published, I think the day of this video is going live, and I'll link to that. But I got a sneak peek of parts 2 and 3 of the process that you've built for this, and I actually ran it for a client of mine, more to kind of see what I could kind of eke out of it. And I looked at a just reviews platform. I think it was a Capterra page, massively unstructured data, and it was able to pull everything together and give me like a list of pros and cons within there. And not only that, but as soon as I started digging into some of the details, it actually was pretty clear that it understood a lot of those reviews really clearly. So it flagged, for example, a big pro of this bit of software was that it was easy to implement, really low barrier to entry, for example. But then one of the cons that it flagged was that there was a really steep learning curve. And to me, I was like, oh, that must be. I'm obviously those two things are opposed to one another. You can't both be easy to implement and then steep learning curve. So I asked ChatGPT to dig into that a bit more and actually explain the difference between the two of them. And it gave me, and I asked it as well for like examples of this, and it made it very clear that it was like easy to implement was like the simple setup stage, the getting it up and running sort of thing. Whereas the steep learning curve was actually people talking more about the mastery of this product and getting it to do all sorts of fancy things that they didn't realize it was capable of previously, which was really interesting. And obviously there are so many ways that can fit into marketing campaigns of easy to implement is obviously a good feature and a good value of a product. But then it's like, oh, and once you've taken that on board and got this up and running, there's actually real benefits to, that it opens up this whole universe. This is a product that will get you up and running to the line that you expect it to run at. And then you can explore all of the possibilities that exist around that sort of thing. So I found
Yeah.
that
Yeah, your
super,
example is pretty like kind of
yeah.
a perfect example because it's like, as marketers, we might say, oh, it's easy as 1, 2, 3. It's so easy to implement. But then it's actually like, oh, once you get in there, you actually don't know what buttons to click. You don't know exactly how to incorporate in your workflow. So then that can be the type of thing where, there's some implementation support that actually is important for this piece of software that could be a key element that maybe a competitor is doing better than you. You might be able to find that out, but also it might tell you like, hey, I need to actually adjust my offering to make sure that like users are retained for using the software because they're actually realizing the value that we promised up front.
Yeah. No, it's so I mean there's so many possibilities from it, which is why it's so exciting. And I think
Yeah.
that, what are the kind of key, I guess, pitfalls that could be with like that you found with this? Because it's not easy. We all know, right? ChatGPT hallucinates and all of that. What are some of the pitfalls that you found?
Yeah, I think it's helpful to kind of understand like how did I come across this process? I think for the last couple of years, a lot of people have been looking for how do I use ChatGPT, how do I use AI in my workflow, and there's been a series of solutions that have just proliferated. There's a new name, a new solution, a new toolkit you should be using, but how well do you use the tool is kind of an important question too. Um, so yeah, originally when I came with this process that I was testing out, I was really in a constrained environment. I had a long flight I had to be on, and I knew I had to write some ad copy. I had to write some creative briefing, and so I wanted to understand what's really the benefit of this. Like, what's the biggest killer benefit of this product? And so I was literally on an airplane, typing away in ChatGPT, trying to come up with trying to come up with some ideas and just kind of see, like, kind of testing, my assumptions of what does ChatGPT give me if I ask it, like, look at this sample of reviews, what will it tell me about this group of customers? What do people really value? Things like that. And ultimately, it flagged a feature, kind of like you were talking about, that I hadn't really considered. Um, that's not to say there weren't issues with when through the various testing I've done. I think that's one of the biggest things is that, um, increasingly with information and technology, we can't take for granted. We also can't take for granted like what the tool is telling us. The tool might be wrong. So one of the things I've kind of emphasized is, like, you don't trust the output, you verify it. You must verify the output to make sure it's actually correct. So there's different ways to do that. But one of the things that I saw is in a recent test was I asked for a series of weaknesses, and one of the reviews it flagged that was an example was very clearly a glowingly positive review about how great the product was, but it was flagging that there was an issue because it mentioned that the problem that the solution was solving was based about time, like not having enough hours in the day, not having enough time. And so ChatGPT misconstrued that as like, this is a problem. They picked up on the negative sentiment, but they didn't actually understand in that case that it was actually the problem that the product was solving. So it can sometimes do that. It can sometimes make issues, make mistakes. So it's important to validate and just and really look at the devil's in the details to make sure it's accurate, and not just take for granted what it's saying. But I will say, more often than not, it's pretty spot on in terms of what it's telling us, and it also oftentimes flags things I wasn't aware of, um, and then it causes me to consider additional questions I wouldn't have thought to ask otherwise when I see something that's kind of surprising. Sometimes it's what I expect a little bit, but usually there's also other angles that I haven't considered. Um, One thing I think maybe would be useful in terms of where does ChatGPT go wrong is just generally, like, when we think about what a customer says, what could go wrong. I do have like a model um, that I put together that could kind of help answer that question. So this is something I was introduced to recently in the last few years, uh, basically about like how to interpret what someone's saying. This was originally something that came up in negotiation. So I learned about this through negotiation, and getting to yes. So what this kind of breaks down is the iceberg theory of customer needs. So it's sort of taking that negotiation positions and applying it to customer needs. So basically, what we have, what the customer says is one thing, but it's what we should think of that as what they say they want. They don't actually know exactly what they really need. So to look at what they really need, we need to look at what are the underlying interests, what are the pain points, what are their certain preferences, what are some past experience they might reveal in terms of what they're telling us, what are some of the assumptions or fears, how much money do they have to spend and invest in this solution. These are all kind of marketing 101 type questions, that as we start getting deeper and deeper, we end up identifying what are the needs, what are the must-haves for a particular solution, and also what's going to resonate with that customer when we activate certain areas of their interest of what they really need. So this is a pretty cool model that I'm sort of applying in a way it was not originally intended for, but I think it's actually a pretty useful mental model. If we just take at face value, the customer says they want X, that may not actually be the best solution if we don't consider what the broader set of pain points, the broader fears, what the economics are of different solutions, what are the alternatives to those solutions. Um, that starts to ultimately get down to kind of more of an emotional and budgetary like question, but it's very helpful to kind of think through with some guided questions to go deeper into what are the needs, what are the must-haves, rather than just what the customer is saying at face value, even in a customer review where they may have had an issue and they may have had a pain point, but what is it about that problem that they really need? What is the true underlying pain point or thing they're trying to solve?
Yeah. And as you say, that is stuff that often people do bring out in reviews. right? They don't, a lot of reviews on pretty much any site, like it starts with, I was looking to use it for X and either it hit my purpose or it didn't hit my need through that. And that's something that can, I mean, it's different from survey data and any of that focus group data, because once you get people in a room like that and ask them what they want, they're really bad at saying it. Humans are bad predictors of future needs. But we are very good at explaining in a situation like a review, for example. I like that data is a lot more, it's a lot less asking me to consciously think about what I think, and it's more a prompt for, did this hit? Did this provide the value that you were looking for? Which ultimately, right, is what we're going after. If to hit the interest, to hit the things that they really need, and the needs, the must-haves within there, we have to provide value to people rather than just hitting what they say they want. Uh,
Mhm.
like people often say they want features. Um, I think the I think the best one is like like smartphone cameras, right? Where people say if people wanted to take good pictures, they would say, "Oh, I want the highest spec camera possible that's able to capture very high resolution images." Whereas where smartphone cameras have gone is actually you don't really need a great camera. Have a standard camera and then have AI fix the image for you. And then that's going to provide the value within that. That's not something that anyone would ever actively say. In fact, people would be like, no, I don't want AI to touch up my images within here. But it ultimately, that's what hits their value within that.
Yeah,
Um,
there's a pretty famous. I think it's actually been verified, but it's actually not the right. It's not a true quote, but there's an anecdote I've heard when I started my career in Silicon Valley, which was basically if Henry Ford had asked his customers what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. He would never have even invented the car because they would have just said, "Oh, I want a faster horse." Now, never mind that, like the actual history tells us that like the first cars were like faster horses, and we even call horsepower like that's still applied to automobiles today. But it's still like I think it's one of those things that has sort of been like adopted, co-opted in a way. But like notice what this theory is really telling us. What is it not? It's not telling us features. It's telling us the underlying why do they really want this thing? What is the true problem they're trying to solve? And how can we make these people's lives better by addressing those problems? Which is very different. It kind of takes us out of our box, and in a way, it helps us take a walk a mile in someone else's shoes and understand the different diverse needs that people have. So it's a pretty helpful framework, I think. And also it sort of breaks us out of the mold of like, oh, AI, like, there's a lot of just like talking points that like kind of miss the mark, I think, on any side of AI and technology. But this kind of boils it down. Like we're really trying to understand what's going to work well for our customers, and like the context in which the product is being experienced. A kind of silly example for me is like I'm a big golfer. I'm a serious golfer. I go to the driving range often, and I'm working with a coach, and I'll set up my phone to record my swing, and one of the like real problems for me is like which would totally make sense if you were like in my shoes, is that like setting up the camera within the framing properly so you can actually see what I needed to see is a real pain for me. So there's apps that kind of help with that. But like if you hadn't considered like my situation, like you might have just assumed, yeah, the app takes photos, but does it tell you what the distance is? What's the proper setup to get the right insights you want? Things like that are deeper level needs, and really like what do you want to know? You want to be able to improve more quickly. I want to improve more quickly at my golf game. So those types of real world experiences that could come out in customer reviews is also pretty helpful.
yeah. I think Oh God, we could carry on this for a long time, and I think probably there's another future chat about other ways to incorporate this, because I agree it's something that finding the most useful applications for AI is like where the game changer is, and a lot of that needs, exactly as you said, where you often have time demands, and really you have an urgency for something where only that this is the tool that kind of fixes that problem. That's where I think it's going to stand out. I'll but we'll wrap up there for the sake of time. I'll leave off by saying a lot of and the process that Matt has created, which is awesome for basically gaining all of these customer insights from user reviews across any platform and getting these kinds of insights out of it. He's created a full process for this. Being a Brit, I'm a big fan of the acronym T that has been applied to it, uh, which you'll have to read the article to find out what that stands for.
Yeah,
But yeah, that he's releasing that. I'll drop a link to the first part of that article with this video, and actually I will update this thread, this video, with links to all of the other parts as they come out. You'll probably, if you want to kind of follow that, then follow Matt. He'll be posting it, I'm sure. Follow the Headlight blog. It's all going to go on there. But as said, also, if you want to follow it, then drop into the comments here, and I'll keep the thread up, if that's the right word, updated with all of the links to parts 1, 2, and 3 of that series, because it takes through both the process of setting up some of the prompts that you share with ChatGPT to kind of set it on the right path, but then also understand, like, how do you solve all of the pitfalls and stop it from hallucinating and make sure that that data is secure. That, I think, is coming in the part 3 of that series. So definitely follow along for getting the full scoop, I guess, or the full tea.
yeah, we yeah. I think I named it T in no small part just to kind of working with you on various projects. So go figure. So
I
yeah,
have
we're
my
definitely spilling the tea on this process, which yeah, we'll tell you more about like how it works. I think in terms of like closing thought to think about, like, you can definitely you have access to ChatGPT and think about prompting. I would take a grain of salt with what you're looking at. Make sure you're verifying the data. Um, and also yeah, also like, yeah, do your experimentation to see. I have seen different results depend even using the same prompts, but the post we will share shows kind of a light version of the process we use. And we use it in all kinds of ways to from creative ideation to figuring out there's certain issues with a product, and also it's just faster, so we can spot these issues earlier on and flag if we're seeing issues from our customer reviews that also kind of explain what's going on with a certain data point. So pretty helpful. We'll obviously have more details with the the 3-part blog, which started as a 1-part blog, but then I guess it was pretty interesting because I kept writing, which is always a good sign.
It is awesome. Well, yeah, thanks for chatting about it. I'll drop all of those links. But yeah, this has been amazing. We'll have to do it again.